I know you just got back from China not long ago. Could you give us a quick update on the state of U.S.-China relations?
Yeah, look, I mean, China and the United States are the two largest economies in the world, the two most powerful militaries in the world. The Chinese government and the U.S. government have to speak. I mean, it's not a choice here. We have to have some measure of communication, if for nothing else, in order to de-escalate potential points of conflict that could lead to something broader. There are obviously very significant irritants in our relationship with China. Some of these are long-term problems that we know we're going to have to address. And so what we're trying to do is manage a period of strategic stability while recognizing that there are areas of our relationship in which we are going to have struggles, not just for years, but perhaps for decades. We recognize this. But I think as much as anything else, we have to recognize that the United States and China have to be able to have points of dialogue and speak to one another. As I said, for no other reason than to be able to have a communication channel. I think in our meetings, it was abundantly clear which are the areas that we do not have strong alignment or agreement on. We understand that there are areas in which long-term we're going to have some real challenges, whether it's supply chains. Put it to you this way. Let's leave China aside for a moment. The United States, and I would argue the world, cannot depend on one country for 90% of anything, especially 90% of things that are critical to our economies, not from our weapon systems to our pharmaceuticals. We just can't live in a world in which we rely on anybody for 90% of what we get in one sole source that could be cut off at any time as leverage against us or punishment or in a time of conflict. And so we are actively searching and have plans in place, and we're implementing these to diversify where we get critical minerals, where we get our supply chain, secure that supply chain. And obviously the Chinese would like to retain their monopoly position in some of these. This is going to be a long-term issue that we're going to have to continue to confront and work on. Work on that continues even while we are engaged in the ability to dialogue and speak to them, because we have to. It's responsible, and we truly have no choice but to be able to do that. It's to their benefit and ours, and I would argue to the benefit of the world that these two countries are able to speak to one another.
I wanted to turn, though, to Taiwan. It's an area that you and I worked on quite a bit together when you were here, including the Taiwan Relations Reinforcement Act and the Transnational Repression Policy Act, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office Certification Act. And I'm very concerned about the President's comments on his recent trip. He noted that arms sales to Taiwan are a, quote, very good negotiating chip. And when he was asked about how much he talked about arms sales with China, he said, we discussed arms sales, quote, in great detail. The 6 assurances included that arms sales to Taiwan would never be a negotiating chip. My concern is that the President now has kind of accentuated the arms sales by not approving, not putting the stamp of approval and completing the arms sale that Congress has already funded. That this sets a stage for China to very much proceed to pursue more aggressively their effort to incorporate Taiwan into the broader framework of China, including extinguishing Taiwan's democracy. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts. Hopefully there's a path here that will re-accentuate our support for Taiwan's democracy.
Thank you. That's an important question. So let me first say on Taiwan, and I think I made this point myself, either on the trip in China or thereafter when we returned. There's been no change to U.S. policy towards Taiwan. I think there's obviously the Chinese side would like to see a change in the verbiage, but no change has been made in that regard. The second point I would make is I believe in December, I know in December of this year, we did approve an arms sales, I think $11 billion. I think it's the single largest arms sale ever. It was a huge sale to Taiwan. This was just last December. I think it's more than the totality of the 4 years under the Biden administration. And I would recall that there were a 6-year period of time under the Obama administration where there were no sales to Taiwan. There is a second pending sale, which I think is the one you're referring to. It's the $14 billion one, and that remains under review. But we just did one in December. So I don't think it's, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but I don't think it's fair to say that the U.S. is not providing it. We just had a massive arms sales, and it was so big and so noticeable that the Chinese became very aggressive about it in some of the incursions they undertook as a result of it. And as I said, it was more in one sale than we did in the entirety of the Biden administration, if I'm correct, and I think I am on that point. So, but the most important thing to understand is we want to see the status quo preserved as is at this moment. That's our policy. That's what we've said. That's what we continue to say. It's a very, as you know, a very delicate relationship to balance. But our policy on Taiwan is not changing, and it did not change on this trip.
I know from our service here together that you agree that China is the greatest national security threat that we face. And one of the key reasons is their repeated threats to take control of Taiwan by force if necessary. And Taiwan, as we both know, is not just some faraway island. It produces 90% of the semiconductor chips critical to everything from F-35s to iPhones. And its geography makes it indispensable, both to global commerce and military power. Do you agree with that?
Taiwan? Yeah, it's not just strategically important in terms of where it's located. It also is the message that it sends to the world if something were to happen to it.
Agreed. That's why for decades, really with leadership from the Senate in a bipartisan way, we've provided arms to deter the PRC's potential military aggression. In fact, you introduced the Taiwan Peace Through Strength Act of 2023. In January, Congress pre-approved a $14 billion arms package for Taiwan. It's been 6 months. We haven't received a notification. Have you advised President Trump to proceed with this?
Yeah, it's under, but I don't know if you were here a moment ago when I discussed, we just did $11 billion in December, which was, I think, the largest sale in history. It's certainly, I think it was more than the cumulative amount under the Biden administration. And I recall during 6 years of the Obama administration, there was zero gone to Taiwan. So some way you would argue that we're trying to make up ground.
So why hold off on it now?
Well, so the other 14 is being reviewed. It's under review. It hasn't been, I think it's been noticed, but it hasn't been reviewed. I mean, it hasn't been approved yet.
So
it's under review under the White House.
Mr. Secretary, my concern is that President Trump has said publicly that arms sales to Taipei are a great negotiating chip with China. And my concern at a time when the PRC has been far more aggressive than they were in previous years, centerline crossing, circumnavigation of Australia, aiding Iran and Russia in their war goals and aims, frankly, literally helping Iranians target U.S. service members. I respect the importance of our having an open negotiation and relationship with the PRC, but in the meetings you were in Beijing, did the president offer to condition arms sales to Taiwan in order to placate Xi Jinping?
Well, look, I'm not going to discuss what was the president's words in a meeting, and not suffice it to say that, you know, that specific question you just asked, that's not the context in which the president has raised this in the past. When the president says it's a great negotiating thing, what he's really saying is it's because China, as you can imagine, always mentions this. Like, this is a top priority for them. They are constantly talking about Taiwan arms sales. But that in no way is what is holding up our decision-making or the White House's decision-making. It is something the president will have to decide on the timing of when and how that is executed on. It's been approved by Congress. It's been noticed. The money's available. And as I said, we are just coming off the heels of a very large sale in December of last year. So there are a variety of reasons why these things don't happen immediately.
Well, I'll just assert, Mr. Secretary, that there is more reason than ever for the administration with congressional support to continue providing robust military capacity to Taiwan, given that the PRC is more and more regionally aggressive.
And as you well know, Honduras switched diplomatic recognition away from Taiwan in 2023 in exchange for a lot of promises from China. No surprise, those promises have not been fulfilled. And the current president, during his campaign, talked about returning back to Taiwan and restoring that relationship with Taiwan. In your budget, you have $245 million for the Countering PRC Influence Fund. And I'd like to note Senator Van Hollen and I have a bill that would actually carve off a portion of that specifically for Taiwan and countering the PRC influence there. So I guess my question is, what can the U.S. do potentially with that fund, Countering PRC Influence Fund, for Taiwan, particularly as it relates to Honduras, kickstarting that relationship, developing joint set of economic priorities for Taiwan in the Western Hemisphere, anything else we can use that fund for?
Yeah, well, first of all, the reason why these countries switched recognition primarily was because, you know, the Chinese would go in and they would say, if you switch recognition, we are going to provide you this loan, this, and in some cases worse than loans. Maybe there was even cases of bribery and things of this nature, but we're going to provide you free this and a free that. We're going to build an auditorium for you. We're going to build a bridge. We're going to build a port. And they haven't kept many of those promises. So I think the first thing is to just point to the fact that,
bait and switch.
Yeah, in many cases, these things are not provided. The other angle of it is if it's loans, they create these debt traps, which is an argument we make all over the world, but particularly in the hemisphere. But the broader goal of this fund is not just simply Taiwan related, although that's the reason why that's an action they took as a result of this leverage that was established on them. But more broader, in many cases, these countries are trying to develop their telecommunications system. They're trying to build roads. They're trying to develop whatever it may be. And frankly, the only companies that show up are the Chinese companies. And they show up with lower cost, a financing mechanism, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's a track record of not completing these projects. There's a track record of flooding the country with Chinese workers that come and do the work. So I think part of this fund is designed to create alternatives to that, to give these countries alternatives to the Chinese or other foreign malign influence that might be occurring in their country. Part of that is attracting U.S. commercial ventures to do it, but part of it is providing the resources so these countries can go out and do this without being subject to or vulnerable to this sort of leverage tactic that's used against them.
Thank you. Let me switch to China for just a minute. Your budget notes the merging of the Foreign Service Institute, where a lot of the state language training takes place, with the Human Resource Bureau. And I'm hoping that can improve the language capacity. But here in the Senate, I've picked up the Uyghur Policy Act, which you led when you were here. Part of the bill that I'm especially supportive of is the provision that's supporting the Uyghur language training for Forest Service officers is not only important but required, and that we have Foreign Service officers in Asia and China that can speak that language. I think it's absolutely vital that our diplomats be able to understand the people in their own language as to the abuses that are going on there. Given your previous experience on this bill and the department's focus on the CCP's repression, do you still support this provision? And can you just speak to how important this is?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the Uyghur language is not a widespread language around the world, but it's incredibly valuable in an important part of the world. And so I think we want to see a language proficiency. That's generally been a challenge writ large over a period of time. And one of the goals of the consolidation is to be able to drive language school more effectively, more quickly to foreign service officers before they're deployed. Obviously, proficiency in certain languages are very difficult. They take longer periods. Some languages are harder to learn than others, especially if the base of the language is, like, just to give an example, it's easy to learn Italian if you speak Spanish. It's much harder to learn Mandarin, and or the Uyghur language for that matter. So, but language is a priority for us. And it's one that, by the way, in our recruitment tools, is one of the things we also look for is whether potential candidates already bring an existing second or third language, which is a huge benefit.
Communist China is trying to win the AI race. And they will use it, for example, to dominate our military if they're able to do that, and so many other ways. A world where Communist China is dominant in AI is very bad for the United States and for the entire world. That's why it's critical that us and our allies cannot lose this race. Semiconductor supply chains, particularly semiconductor manufacturing equipment, SMEs, are critical to winning this competition. It's one area that Beijing is spending billions and billions of dollars to be able to produce chips in China, and they've failed to be able to produce those high-end chips so far. President Trump understands this better than anyone because the Trump administration was the first to utilize export controls on SMEs to slow down Communist China's advanced chip-making industry. Since that time, key allies and partners have also imposed controls on SMEs to China. However, their controls have not been as restrictive as U.S. controls, and this has allowed certain foreign countries to backfill the Chinese market with critical dual-use tools. Secretary Rubio, do you agree that export controls on SMEs are critical to maintaining our technological advantage over Communist China?
It is. It's actually where it's most critical is in the high end. The areas, that are not legacy, that are broader and that allow for that. I think on the broader point of AI, we share your view. One of the initiatives that I think Jacob Helberg's done a great job with at the State Department is Pax Silica, in which we've signed up all these countries around the world. I think we're up to 13 or 14, and including ourselves and others who hope to join as well, in which we can create this global consortium for all of the elements of the AI supply needs. It's not just the innovation, it's obviously access to the minerals and the critical elements necessary in order to produce these chips and all the things that it will take to lead the world in AI. I think it is safe to say the United States right now is a global leader on AI. I think it is also wise to say that that lead is not irreversible. It has to be sustained, and there will be a real challenge in sustaining it. And we're going to have to stay focused on it. The good news is I do think we have a system of global alliances that view it the way we do. And we want to lead on it because it's not just about leading the technology in AI, it's about also leading in the standards that will govern how AI is used. I don't want to monopolize this conversation on this point, but it's one that I think the Senate should think about because I know we're starting to think about it. AI will have very positive impacts on our economy and societies. It will also have some detriments. There will be white-collar jobs in this country that will be impacted. And I think we have to start thinking not simply about the impact that AI will have on those jobs, but the societal pressures that will create, not just in the United States, but in economies all over the world. Much like industrialization and automation did, it will make the worker more efficient and more valuable, but it will eliminate some jobs, and those jobs will have to be replaced with new jobs or new skills. That's not just an economic issue. That is a political issue. That, over time, could destabilize societies all over the world. So we have to start thinking about AI in those terms as well.
You mentioned our allies. Shouldn't they have to follow the same sort of standards U.S. companies do when we're limiting the semi-manufacturing equipment that's going to Communist China?
And that's our hope, is that we can create people that we can create a coalition of nations that understand the danger in this. And they're running through the same, some are better than others, but they're running through the same problems that we run into. And that is companies ultimately want to sell to the markets, and China's a large market. But I agree, and that's one of the goals behind Pax Silica, is to create unanimity or consensus behind that thinking.
I want you to sort of answer the China watchers who saw that visit to China and saw that NVIDIA is now going to sell H200s. I understand that's not our highest technology, but it's better than what China has, and that's why people are worried. It's pretty plain that the president violated one of the 6 assurances. I understand that the ambassador and you and others have sort of followed up to kind of smooth the edges, but I mean, it's pretty clear. He says, we discussed arms sales in great detail. It depends on China. It's a very good negotiating chip for us. So what do you say to China watchers who say they got some pretty good deliverables and we didn't get much?
I don't see the trip. There were some deliverables, the purchase of additional Boeing aircraft, which of course is beneficial to the Chinese as well, but helps our company, some of the agricultural concessions. But the trip was largely, for the most part, about the fact that the 2 largest, most powerful countries in the world have to have direct interaction with one another. And this was an opportunity to do it. He will reciprocate by visiting the United States later next year. Separate from that, and I don't know if you were here at the outset in my opening statement, or maybe it was in response to one of the questions, I think 2 things are clear. Number one is that we're entering into a period of strategic stability that I think serves the interests of both countries, because the last thing we want is a largely destabilizing event in the Indo-Pacific. But the second is that there are clear differences of priorities. There are clear irritants in that relationship that are long-standing and that are going to be long-term. Critical minerals dependencies, things of this nature. So it's one of those relationships that's going to require very deft diplomacy and mature decision-making.
Sure, and this is why I like our engagement. Like, that makes sense to me. But
I'd like to start with the Philippines, an area that we know very well. It's a geographic center of the Indo-Pacific region. It's an area that is along critical sea lanes where a tremendous amount of world trade and energy commerce actually move. A strong alliance with the Philippines clearly is in U.S. national security interest. It leads and supports our freedom of navigation. It also helps us deliver regional stability along the South China Sea, a very critical area, particularly in the face of a very aggressive posture that the Chinese have adopted. I want to recognize my colleague, Senator Kaine, who's worked with me to put in place the Philippines Enhanced Resilience Act. That's $500 million of FMF grants. It's $1 billion of loan and loan guarantees per year to strengthen the Philippines and the United States alliance to make us more interoperable and more capable. Mr. Secretary, I'd just like to get your comments, your vision on the role of the Philippines in the United States alliance.
Actually, I spoke to President Marcos on Sunday, and have had multiple engagements with them at a personal level. We've had visits. A couple good points here. The first is we've actually entered into agreement with them in which I believe it's an old U.S. military facility inside the Philippines that will now serve as sort of I think it's a 4,000 acre.
I'm very familiar with the area.
Yeah, you know it. And that we'll be able to do a lot of our activities together with regards to our joint interests in developing on AI and high tech and diversifying and helping diversify their economy. The second is to continue with our defense commitments that we've made to them and the ability to interoperate joint exercises, which we've done now multiple times over the last year. Obviously, we're very concerned with Scarborough. We've seen in recent days, and we've demarched and made a very clear note. This issue came up during the first meeting with the Chinese. It's come up in every engagement I've had with the Chinese, and it's come up again now very recently through diplomatic channels, and that is we're very concerned about recent activity once again near Scarborough and the buildup of infrastructure that appears to be exerting, territorial claims that we have long argued are not valid. This is one of those irritants in the long term that I think we'll continue to have to manage. But I view the Philippines as a critical partner, and I think over the last, I would say, couple of years, our relationship with them, particularly under their new administration, has dramatically improved our ability to work with the Philippines jointly on a number of topics of interest.
Well, I want to commend you. The 4,000-acre Luzon corridor is anchored by the Subic Bay project, which, when I was ambassador to Japan, worked very hard to get that back for America. And I see that as a tremendous opportunity for us to deepen our economic ties. And of course, that has, as you mentioned earlier, tremendous national security.
Yeah, can I just add one point? There is, some desire during their chairmanship this year of ASEAN that to reach a sort of code of conduct understanding in the Indo-Pacific. And while I understand that desire, I just want you to know, and perhaps many of you can help us in making this point, a bad code of conduct agreement is worse than no code of conduct agreement at all. And I think that's very important because they are under withering constant pressure in the region to agree to a code of conduct in the region that I think would be detrimental, would set a precedent that I think is very dangerous in the law. So we'd love to see one, but it has to be a good one. We don't think that's possible under current conditions, and a bad one is worse than none at all.